The slap echoed across the hall so loudly that even the musicians froze mid-note. Crystal glasses trembled on the white-clothed tables. Conversations died instantly. Every eye turned toward the source of the sound. Darius Whitmore, the most powerful real estate developer in Fulton County, stood frozen in his tailored navy blue suit, his face turned sharply to the side. A faint red mark bloomed across his cheek. Standing before him was Naomi Carter. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her dark brown eyes blazing with a fire no one in that room had ever seen before. And behind her, clutching her designer purse like it was armor, stood Evelyn Whitmore, Darius's mother, the woman who had once said Naomi was too local to marry her son. "You lied," Naomi's voice trembled, but it did not break. "You stood there and watched her destroy my life, and you said nothing." Gasps rippled through the guests. Some of Atlanta's wealthiest families were present: business executives, politicians, media personalities. They had all come to celebrate the Whitmore Foundation's annual charity gala. But now, they were witnessing something far more powerful. Something personal. Something explosive. Darius opened his mouth, but no words came out. Because he knew. He knew Naomi wasn't wrong. Evelyn stepped forward immediately, her expensive heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "How dare you create a scene here?" she snapped coldly, her voice filled with venom. "Security!" "No," Darius said suddenly, raising his hand. His voice was quiet, but it carried authority. Everyone froze again. He turned back to Naomi, his expression no longer angry, but afraid. Because Naomi Carter wasn't the same quiet, humble woman Evelyn had dismissed 2 years ago. Not anymore. And what Naomi held in her hand, the small, folded document, had the power to destroy everything the Whitmore family had built. Naomi lifted it slightly. Her fingers did not tremble this time. "You told her I was nothing," Naomi said, staring directly at Evelyn. "You said I was too local, too small, too ordinary to ever belong in your family." Evelyn scoffed. "Because you were." A murmur spread across the room. But Naomi smiled. And that smile made Evelyn's stomach twist in a way she could not explain. "Funny," Naomi said softly, "because everything you built, every dollar, every building, every piece of your empire." She raised the document higher. "Has my name on it." The room went completely silent. Darius's face drained of color. Evelyn blinked. Once. Twice. Then laughed sharply. "That's impossible." But Naomi didn't answer. She only looked at Darius. And in that moment, the truth sat heavy between them. A truth buried beneath years of pride, betrayal, and secrets. A truth that began long before this gala. Long before Evelyn Whitmore ever decided Naomi Carter was too local. Long before Naomi Carter became the woman standing here now, holding the fate of the Whitmore empire in her hands. Because 2 years ago, Naomi Carter was just a girl everyone overlooked. A girl who lived in a small brick house on Auburn Avenue. A girl who wore her natural curls proudly, who worked double shifts, and who believed love was stronger than pride. Back then, she never imagined the woman who called her local would one day beg for her mercy. And she never imagined the man she loved would be forced to choose between his mother and the truth. But the moment that changed, everything didn't begin at the gala. It began on a humid summer afternoon. The day Evelyn Whitmore first saw Naomi Carter and decided she wasn't good enough. Back then, Naomi had been standing outside the Sweet Magnolia Café, wiping her hands on her apron after a long shift. Her braids were pulled into a neat bun, and sweat glistened on her forehead. She was tired, but she was proud. She had paid her own way through community college. She had never asked anyone for anything. She believed her hard work would speak for itself. She didn't know that in Evelyn Whitmore's world, hard work meant nothing without status. A black luxury car pulled up to the curb that day. Naomi barely noticed at first. until Darius Whitmore stepped out. Tall, calm, confident, wearing success like a second skin. He walked into the café, not knowing that simple decision would alter both their lives forever. And when his eyes met Naomi, for the first time, neither of them knew they were standing at the beginning of a storm that would one day explode in front of the entire city. But the worst part wasn't falling in love. The worst part was what Evelyn Whitmore would do to destroy it. Because Evelyn didn't just disapprove. She planned. Carefully. Quietly. Patiently. And by the time Naomi realized what Evelyn had done, it was already too late. Because the damage wasn't just emotional. It was permanent. And the truth Naomi now held in her hand at the gala was proof that Evelyn Whitmore had made a mistake she could never undo. The first time Evelyn Whitmore saw Naomi Carter, she didn't look at her face. She looked at her shoes. Simple white sneakers, clean but worn at the edges. Evelyn noticed everything in seconds. The café apron, the natural braids, the lack of designer anything. And she had already made her decision. Not good enough. Evelyn sat stiffly at the corner table of Sweet Magnolia Cafe, her back straight like she was afraid the chair might lower her value. Her eyes scanned the place with quiet judgment. The small chalkboard menu, the laughter of customers, the warmth in the air. To her, it all looked small. Darius sat across from her, relaxed. "You're not even listening," Evelyn said sharply, tapping her manicured nails on the table. "I am," Darius replied calmly. "No, you're not," she said. "You're distracted." He didn't answer. Because he was distracted. Naomi was walking toward them with 2 cups of coffee on a small tray. Her movements were steady, confident, natural. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't pretending to be anything else. She was just herself. 2 house blends, Naomi said politely, placing the cups gently on the table. Darius looked up at her. And for a brief moment, the world went quiet. Her smile was simple, honest. Not practiced. Not forced. Real. "Thank you," he said. Naomi nodded and turned to leave, but Evelyn's voice stopped her. "Excuse me," Evelyn said coldly. Naomi turned back. "Yes, ma'am." Evelyn gave her a thin smile. "How long have you worked here?" Naomi blinked slightly, surprised by the question. "About 3 years," she answered. Evelyn nodded slowly, her eyes scanning Naomi again. "And this is your career?" The question wasn't curious. It was insulting. Naomi felt it instantly. But she kept her composure. "I'm also finishing my business administration program," Naomi replied calmly. "I work here to support myself." Evelyn hummed, clearly unimpressed. Darius noticed. And he didn't like it. Naomi walked away, but Evelyn leaned closer to her son. "That girl," Evelyn said quietly, "is exactly the kind of distraction you don't need." Darius frowned. "She's just doing her job." Evelyn sipped her coffee. "People like her," she said, "see men like you as opportunity." Darius's jaw tightened. "You don't know her." Evelyn smiled slightly. "I know enough." But she didn't. Not yet. Because Naomi Carter wasn't chasing opportunity. She was building her own future. One honest day at a time. And Darius would soon see that. Over the next few weeks, he kept coming back. Sometimes for coffee. Sometimes with excuses he barely believed himself. And every time, Naomi treated him the same way she treated everyone else. With respect. But never desperation. She didn't flirt. She didn't chase. She didn't change who she was. And that was new to him. Darius had spent his life around people who wanted something. Money. Status. Access. But Naomi never asked him for anything. One evening, after closing time, Darius lingered near the counter. Naomi was wiping down the surface. You don't have to keep pretending, she said without looking up. He blinked. Pretending. She smiled faintly. You don't like coffee this much. He laughed softly. You caught me. She looked at him then. For someone like you, this place must feel small. He shook his head. No, he said honestly, it feels real. Naomi studied him carefully. People like Darius Whitmore didn't usually say things like that. But something about him felt different. And that scared her. Because she knew the distance between their worlds. She knew how people like him lived. And she knew how people like her were seen. Still, she found herself smiling. And he found himself staying longer. Weeks turned into months. They talked about everything. Dreams. Fears. Family. Life. Darius told her about the pressure of carrying the Whitmore name. Naomi told him about her mother, who had raised her alone with strength and dignity. He admired her independence. She admired his humility. And slowly, quietly, they fell in love. But Evelyn Whitmore was watching. She noticed the changes in her son immediately. The way he smiled more. The way he became protective of his phone. The way he mentioned Naomi's name without realizing it. Evelyn didn't confront him right away. She investigated. She learned everything about Naomi Carter. Her neighborhood. Her job. Her income. Her background. And what she learned confirmed her worst fear. Naomi Carter had no power. No influence. No legacy. In Evelyn's eyes, Naomi was a threat. Not because she was dangerous, but because she was ordinary. And Evelyn Whitmore believed ordinary people did not belong in extraordinary families. One evening, Evelyn made a decision. She would not argue with her son. She would not fight him openly. She would do something smarter. Something quieter. She would remove Naomi Carter from his life permanently. And Naomi would never even know how it happened. Because Evelyn Whitmore didn't lose. She eliminated obstacles. And Naomi Carter was now an obstacle. Before the story continues, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever seen someone judged unfairly just because of where they came from? Comment below where you are watching from and share your thoughts. And if you believe Naomi deserves justice, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because what Evelyn Whitmore did next was far worse than anyone could have imagined. Evelyn Whitmore did not believe in chance. She believed in control. And control meant removing problems before they grew into threats. She sat in her home office late one evening, the Atlanta skyline glowing beyond her floor-to-ceiling windows. Her fingers rested lightly on a thick manila folder placed neatly on her desk. Inside it was Naomi Carter's life. Every detail. Her address on Auburn Avenue, her job at Sweet Magnolia Café, her enrollment records at Atlanta Metropolitan College, even the fact that her mother, Lorraine Carter, worked long shifts as a nursing assistant. Evelyn closed the folder slowly. To her, Naomi was not a person. She was a weakness. And Evelyn Whitmore did not allow weakness near her family. The next morning, Naomi woke up feeling hopeful. She stood in her small bedroom, sunlight spilling through the thin curtains. Her room was simple but clean. A bookshelf filled with textbooks, a small desk, a framed photo of her and her mother smiling together. She picked up her phone. A message from Darius waited. Dinner tonight. She smiled. Her fingers hovered over the screen before typing back. Yes. She placed the phone down, unaware that far away, Evelyn Whitmore was already setting her plan into motion. Later that day, Naomi arrived at Sweet Magnolia Café like she always did. She greeted her coworkers, tied on her apron, started her shift. Everything felt normal. Until her manager, Mr. Havorson, approached her with a strange expression. "Naomi," he said quietly, "can I speak with you?" Her stomach tightened slightly. "Of course." They stepped into the small office in the back. Mr. Havorson closed the door gently. He looked uncomfortable. "I received a call this morning," he said. Naomi frowned. "A call?" He nodded. "From someone important." Naomi felt confusion creep in. "What did they say?" Mr. Havorson hesitated. "They said they're conducting a financial review of the café," he explained slowly. "They asked questions about staff." Naomi's chest tightened. "And?" He sighed. "They said they recommended some changes." Naomi stared at him. "What kind of changes?" He couldn't meet her eyes. "Naomi," he said softly, "they suggested we let you go." The words hit her like cold water. "What?" Mr. Havorson shook his head quickly. "I don't agree with it," he said. "You're one of our best workers, but they made it clear. If we don't cooperate, funding could be affected." Naomi felt her world tilt. "Who called?" she asked. He hesitated again. "They didn't say." But Naomi already knew. She didn't have proof. But she knew. Because there was only one person powerful enough to reach into her life like this. Evelyn Whitmore. Naomi walked home in silence that evening. The streets of Auburn Avenue felt different somehow. Smaller. Colder. She reached her house and opened the door quietly. Her mother looked up from the couch. "You're home early," Lorraine said gently. Naomi forced a smile. "Slow day." She couldn't bring herself to tell her the truth. Not yet. Because saying it out loud would make it real. That night, she sat on her bed, staring at her phone. Darius called. She let it ring. He called again. She didn't answer. Because she didn't know what to say. She didn't want him to see her as someone who needed saving. Across town, Darius sat in his penthouse apartment, staring at his phone with growing concern. Naomi had never ignored his calls before. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Meanwhile, Evelyn Whitmore sat in her dining room, calm and satisfied. She lifted her teacup with steady hands. Step 1 was complete. Naomi Carter was now unstable. Vulnerable. Easier to remove. But Evelyn wasn't finished. Because she understood something important. Love didn't die easily. It had to be broken. Carefully. Thoroughly. Completely. And she knew exactly how to do it. The next morning, Naomi checked her email. Her hands froze. Her college tuition account had been flagged. Outstanding balance. Registration on hold. She stared at the screen in disbelief. She had paid her fees. She knew she had. Her heart began to race. One problem could be coincidence. 2 problems were not. Someone was dismantling her life piece by piece. Someone powerful. Someone patient. Someone who wanted her gone. Her phone rang suddenly. It was an unknown number. She hesitated. Then answered. "Hello." A calm, cold voice replied. "You need to stop seeing Darius." Naomi's blood ran cold. She knew that voice. Evelyn Whitmore. Naomi said nothing. Evelyn continued. "You are not his future." Silence stretched between them. "You can walk away now," Evelyn said quietly. "With dignity." Naomi swallowed hard. "And if I do?" Evelyn didn't hesitate. "Then everything you've built will continue to disappear." The line went dead. Naomi lowered the phone slowly. Her hands trembled. Not with fear. With realization. This wasn't about love. This was about power. And Evelyn Whitmore believed Naomi had none. But Evelyn Whitmore had made one mistake. She believed Naomi Carter would break. She didn't know Naomi Carter had been fighting her whole life. She didn't know Naomi had nothing left to lose. And when someone has nothing left to lose, they become dangerous. That night, Naomi made a decision. She would not run. She would not beg. She would not disappear. She would confront Evelyn Whitmore, even if it destroyed her. But Naomi had no idea. Evelyn Whitmore was already preparing the final move. A move that would not just separate Naomi from Darius, but would make Darius hate her forever. Naomi didn't sleep that night. She sat at the small wooden table in her kitchen, staring at nothing while the clock ticked loudly on the wall. Her mother had gone to bed hours earlier, unaware of the storm gathering around her daughter. Naomi replayed Evelyn's words in her mind. You need to stop seeing Darius. Not a request. An order. Naomi had faced hardship before. She had grown up watching her mother work double shifts, come home exhausted, and still find the strength to smile. She had learned early that life didn't give fairness freely. But this felt different. This wasn't life. This was someone choosing to hurt her. Carefully. Deliberately. Her phone buzzed again. Darius. She stared at his name, glowing on the screen. Her heart ached. She wanted to answer. She wanted to hear his voice. She wanted to believe he would stand beside her. But Evelyn's power had already shown itself. If Naomi pulled Darius into this now, Evelyn would only escalate faster. Naomi declined the call. Across the city, Darius stared at his phone in disbelief. Something was very wrong. Naomi had never shut him out like this. He grabbed his keys and headed straight for Auburn Avenue. Meanwhile, Evelyn Whitmore sat in her office, reviewing documents calmly. She had anticipated Naomi's silence. It was part of the process. Break her stability. Isolate her emotionally. Force her into a corner. Then remove her completely. Her assistant entered the room quietly. Ma'am, he said, everything is ready. Evelyn nodded once. Good. She didn't smile. Because this wasn't personal to her. It was necessary. At least, that's what she told herself. Later that morning, Naomi walked to Atlanta Metropolitan College to speak with the administration office. She needed answers. The campus buzzed with students laughing, talking, living their lives normally. Naomi felt like she was moving through a different world. A colder one. She stepped into the financial office. The woman at the desk greeted her politely. How can I help you? Naomi explained the issue. The woman typed on her computer. Her expression changed. She frowned. That's strange. Naomi's stomach tightened. What is it? The woman turned the screen slightly. It says your payment was reversed. Naomi blinked. Reversed? Yes, the woman said. The payment was flagged by the issuing bank as unauthorized. Naomi's mind raced. That was impossible. She had paid it herself. She had receipts. Proof. Can I see when this happened? Naomi asked. The woman nodded and clicked again. Naomi leaned closer. Her heart stopped. The request had been submitted 2 days ago. 2 days ago. The same day she lost her job. This wasn't coincidence. This was Evelyn. Naomi walked out of the office in silence. Her world was shrinking. Her opportunities closing. Her future being erased. But she refused to cry. Because crying would mean defeat. As she stepped outside, she froze. Darius stood across the street. His eyes locked onto hers instantly. Relief flooded his face. But Naomi felt fear. Not of him. Of what Evelyn might do if she saw them together now. He crossed the street quickly. Naomi, he said, his voice filled with concern. What's going on? Why haven't you answered me? She couldn't speak. He stepped closer. Talk to me. She looked at him, her heart breaking. Because she knew he didn't fully understand the danger yet. Darius, she said softly, you need to go. He stared at her in confusion. What? You need to leave me alone. The words tasted bitter. He shook his head. No, I'm not doing that. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. You don't understand, she whispered. Then help me understand, he said firmly. She almost told him everything. Almost. But then she remembered Evelyn's voice. If you don't walk away, everything you've built will disappear. Naomi stepped back. Please, she said, just go. The pain on his face was immediate. Real. Deep. He had never seen her look at him like that before. Like he was a stranger. Like he was danger. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply nodded slowly and walked away. Naomi watched him leave. Each step felt like something inside her was breaking. She had protected him, but she had also lost him. Across the street, inside a parked black sedan, Evelyn Whitmore watched everything. Her face remained calm, emotionless, controlled. Phase 2 was complete. Darius would now begin to doubt Naomi. Distance would grow. Love would weaken. Soon, he would move on. And Naomi Carter would become nothing more than a memory. But Evelyn Whitmore still wasn't finished. Because doubt alone wasn't enough. She needed finality. She needed something irreversible. Something that would make sure Darius never looked back. That night, Naomi returned home exhausted. She opened her mailbox absent-mindedly. Inside was a single envelope. No return address. Her name typed neatly on the front. Her heart began to pound. She opened it slowly. Inside was a printed photograph. Naomi stared at it in confusion. Then shock. Then horror. It was a photo of Darius, standing close to another woman. A beautiful woman. And it looked intimate. Too intimate. Naomi's hands began to shake. She didn't know that the photo had been staged. She didn't know Evelyn Whitmore had arranged it. All she knew was what she saw. And in that moment, Naomi Carter believed she had been replaced. Naomi stared at the photograph until her vision blurred. Her fingers tightened around the paper as her mind struggled to make sense of what she was seeing. Darius stood beside a woman Naomi had never seen before. The woman's hand rested lightly on his arm. They were close, comfortable, familiar. Too familiar. Naomi's chest felt hollow. For weeks, her life had been unraveling piece by piece. She had lost her job. Her college registration had been blocked. The man she loved had begun drifting away. And now this. Proof. Or what looked like proof. Her first instinct was denial. Not Darius. Not him. He wasn't like that. But doubt crept in quietly. Slowly. Poisonously. Because Evelyn Whitmore's voice echoed in her mind again. You are not his future. Naomi folded the photo carefully, though her hands trembled. She stepped inside the house and leaned against the door, trying to breathe. Her mother's voice called from the living room. Naomi, is everything all right? Naomi forced strength into her voice. Yes, Mama, I'm just tired. Lorraine Carter walked toward her daughter, her kind eyes immediately sensing the truth Naomi was trying to hide. You don't look tired, Lorraine said gently. You look hurt. Naomi swallowed hard. She had always told her mother everything. But this felt different. This felt like something she needed to carry alone. I'll be okay, Naomi said softly. Lorraine studied her for a moment, then nodded. You've always been stronger than you think, she said. Naomi nodded faintly. But inside, she wasn't sure anymore. Later that night, Naomi sat alone in her room. The photograph lay on her desk. She stared at it again. Her heart demanded answers. But her pride demanded distance. She picked up her phone. Darius's number stared back at her. She could call him. She could ask him the truth. But another thought stopped her. If he loved her, why hadn't he fought harder when she pushed him away? Why hadn't he shown up again? Why had he allowed the silence to grow? Pain has a way of twisting logic. And Evelyn Whitmore understood that perfectly. Across town, Darius sat alone in his penthouse, staring at his own phone. He hadn't heard from Naomi in days. Her silence was louder than any argument. He had tried to respect her request for space, but it was tearing him apart. He couldn't focus. He couldn't sleep. Something was wrong, and he needed to fix it. He grabbed his jacket. He would go see her. He didn't care what she said. He wouldn't lose her without a fight. But as he reached the door, his phone rang. Evelyn. He hesitated, then answered. Hello, Mother. Her voice was calm. Darius, come by the house tomorrow. There's something important we need to discuss. He frowned. I'm busy tomorrow. This concerns your future, she said firmly. Something in her tone made him pause. Fine, he said reluctantly. He didn't know that Evelyn Whitmore was about to deliver the final blow. The next afternoon, Darius sat across from his mother in her elegant living room. Sunlight poured in through the tall windows, but the warmth did nothing to ease the tension in the room. Evelyn slid a folder across the table. I had hoped I wouldn't need to show you this, she said. Darius frowned. What is it? He opened the folder. Inside were photographs. His heart dropped. Photos of Naomi. Standing beside a man. Laughing. Talking closely. Looking intimate. His chest tightened. This was taken recently, Evelyn said quietly, after she pushed you away. Darius stared at the images, disbelief flooding his mind. No, he whispered. Evelyn leaned forward. I warned you, she said gently. Some people see opportunity, not love. Darius's hands clenched. He wanted to reject it. He wanted to defend Naomi. But the photos, they looked real. Convincing. Painful. Evelyn watched him carefully. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The damage was already done. Darius closed the folder slowly. His heart felt heavy. Broken. Confused. He stood up without a word. Evelyn watched him leave. For the first time since this began, she allowed herself a small breath of relief. It was over. Or so she believed. Meanwhile, Naomi sat at her desk, staring at the photo she had received. Two people. Two lies. Two broken hearts. Both victims of the same invisible hand. But Naomi didn't know that yet. What she did know was this. She could not stay here. Everything around her was tied to pain now. She needed distance. She needed space to rebuild. To become someone no one could break again. The next morning, Naomi made a decision. She withdrew from school, packed her belongings, and prepared to leave Auburn Avenue. She didn't tell Darius. She didn't tell anyone. Except her mother. Lorraine hugged her tightly. Where will you go? Lorraine asked softly. Naomi looked ahead with quiet determination. Somewhere. She said, I can build something they can't take from me. She didn't know exactly where yet. But she knew one thing for certain. She would never again allow someone like Evelyn Whitmore to decide her worth. As Naomi stepped onto the bus that afternoon, she didn't look back. She didn't see the black sedan parked across the street. She didn't see Evelyn Whitmore watching from inside. And she didn't see the slight frown forming on Evelyn's face. Because something about Naomi's calm departure didn't look like defeat. It looked like preparation. And Evelyn Whitmore had just made the most dangerous mistake of all. She had pushed Naomi Carter into becoming someone far more powerful than she had ever imagined. Naomi's journey away from Atlanta was quiet, deliberate. She took a Greyhound bus to a city she had never been to before, Charlotte, North Carolina. The unfamiliar skyline of towering buildings and bustling streets felt intimidating, but also strangely freeing. Here, no one knew her. Here, she could rebuild. She found a small apartment tucked between a row of brownstones. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. The walls were bare, the floors creaked, and the heater rattled in the winter wind. But for the first time in weeks, Naomi felt a flicker of control. She unpacked a single suitcase and laid out her few belongings carefully. Her textbooks, her laptop, a notebook filled with business ideas, and the photograph that Evelyn had sent, folded and kept under her pillow. Naomi sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the photo. Her fingers traced the image of Darius laughing with another woman. But now, rather than pain, a different feeling started to grow inside her. Determination. Naomi realized something crucial. Evelyn had tried to break her, but the fire she had inside could not be snuffed out by lies or manipulation. She had lost some things, yes, her relationship, her school, her sense of stability, but she still had herself, and that was enough. She pulled out her notebook and began writing. Plans, ideas, contacts she could call, strategies she could implement. Within hours, Naomi had mapped out a small but ambitious business venture, one that could grow faster than anyone would expect. One that could give her independence and power, the kind Evelyn Whitmore thought she lacked. Weeks passed. Naomi worked tirelessly. She got a part-time job at a small co-working space, helping with administrative tasks. During her breaks, she networked quietly, pitching ideas to potential investors. Every no she received fueled her even more. Every skeptical glance reminded her that she had to be sharper, stronger, and smarter than anyone had ever expected. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, the Whitmore mansion was quiet but tense. Darius could not stop thinking about Naomi. He had tried to follow Evelyn's lead to distance himself, but the image of her calm determination haunted him. Evelyn noticed. "Mother, why did you do it?" he finally asked during dinner one night, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. Evelyn looked up from her wine glass, her expression unreadable. "I did what any mother would do for her family," she said smoothly. "I protected you from someone who could never belong in this world. She was too local, Darius. You knew that." Darius's fists clenched. "Local? She's the most remarkable person I've ever met. You didn't protect me. You lied to me. And you manipulated her life. How could you do that?" Evelyn remained calm, but a flicker of irritation crossed her face. "You're blinded by your feelings. You'll thank me later." Darius left the table without another word. But that night, he didn't sleep. He called Naomi's number over and over. No answer. He went to her apartment. Empty. The building manager shrugged apologetically. She hadn't lived there long. It was as if she had vanished. Naomi, in Charlotte, had taken steps to make sure she was untraceable. She didn't know yet if Darius would try to find her, but she didn't care. She had learned the first rule of survival: never let someone else control your path. 2 months into her new life, Naomi's business plan had begun to take shape. She partnered with a local entrepreneur who saw her potential and began funding her startup ideas. Within weeks, her small venture began to attract attention. The media picked up on her story. A young woman, starting with nothing, building something from the ground up. Her name started circulating quietly among business circles. Naomi Carter, unknown no longer. But Evelyn Whitmore was not the type to ignore someone rising in the shadows. One morning, she received a notification on her phone. A local news article about a young female entrepreneur in Charlotte who was gaining investors and public interest rapidly. Evelyn scanned the article, her eyebrows furrowed. Naomi Carter. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "She's moving faster than I thought," she muttered. Darius, meanwhile, had tracked down a friend of Naomi's in Charlotte. He learned she had been building something incredible. He felt a surge of pride, but also regret. He had underestimated her. He had allowed his mother's interference to push her away. And now, Naomi's success was growing at a pace even he struggled to keep up with. Naomi's phone buzzed that evening with a message from an unknown number. She opened it cautiously. It read simply, "Do not trust anyone. She is still watching." Naomi's hands tightened around the phone. Evelyn Whitmore. Naomi realized her adversary was far from finished. Evelyn had underestimated her once. She wouldn't make that mistake again. but Naomi smiled. This time she would be ready. Her mind raced with possibilities. She could rebuild, yes, but she could also strike strategically. Not out of revenge, not yet, but to protect herself, her future, and her worth. Naomi leaned back in her chair and whispered to herself, a quiet promise. They think I'm nothing. They think I'm too local, but they don't know my worth, not yet. And somewhere in the distance, the storm that had begun in Atlanta was quietly, invisibly shifting. The next confrontation would not be one-sided. By the time spring arrived in Charlotte, Naomi Carter had become a force quietly impossible to ignore. Her small startup, initially only a few desks and laptops in a rented co-working space, had grown into a team of ambitious young professionals who believed in her vision. Word spread fast. Naomi was brilliant, strategic, and fearless. Investors began reaching out on their own. Opportunities she had only dreamed of were now knocking at her door. Naomi, however, didn't let herself get distracted. Every email, every meeting, every decision was carefully considered. She remembered Evelyn Whitmore's threats, her calculated moves to dismantle Naomi's life. That woman believed power came from money, influence, and manipulation. But Naomi had learned a different kind of power: resilience, creativity, and self-belief. One late afternoon, Naomi sat in a conference room with her closest partners, reviewing projections. She had just secured a major investor, someone who had previously dismissed her as just local, the very words Evelyn had used. Naomi smiled quietly to herself. That phrase, once meant to wound, now fueled her determination. "Naomi," one of her partners said, breaking the silence, "the deal is set. With this funding, we can expand operations nationwide within the year." Naomi nodded. "Good, but remember, we grow smart, not fast. We protect our foundation." Her partner raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking ahead, too far ahead." She shook her head. "No, I'm thinking ahead because there are people who will try to tear this down, and we won't let them." Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, Darius Whitmore couldn't stop thinking about Naomi. He had tried to move on after Evelyn's manipulations, but her absence had left a void he couldn't fill. He had confronted Evelyn repeatedly, asking why she had interfered, but she only gave him the same chilling line: "You'll thank me later." But Darius didn't feel gratitude. He felt anger and regret. He had allowed Naomi to be pushed out of his life. He had allowed lies to define her worth. And now, he needed answers. One evening, he made a decision. He would find Naomi, not just to confront her, but to understand what had happened and perhaps to make things right. Darius contacted a mutual acquaintance, someone who had kept in touch with Naomi during her move to Charlotte. Slowly, he pieced together the truth. Naomi had left, yes, but she hadn't disappeared. She had been building something remarkable, something that would have made even Evelyn pause. His heart raced as he looked at the evidence. Naomi wasn't broken. She wasn't defeated. She was thriving. And Darius realized something crucial. The woman he loved was no longer the same Naomi he had met at Sweet Magnolia Café. She was stronger, smarter, untouchable in ways that Evelyn Whitmore had never anticipated. Across town, Evelyn Whitmore sat in her office, scanning the latest news alerts on her tablet. Her expression shifted from confidence to disbelief. Headlines celebrated a young entrepreneur from Charlotte, Naomi Carter, who had just secured a multi-million-dollar deal. The same girl she had called too local was now making waves that even the Whitmore Foundation couldn't ignore. Evelyn tapped the screen sharply. "This isn't possible," she muttered. "She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't have recovered so quickly. She shouldn't be winning." The truth was slowly sinking in. Evelyn Whitmore had underestimated Naomi Carter. She had thought that fear, manipulation, and distance would be enough. But Naomi had grown in ways Evelyn hadn't predicted: strong, resourceful, and untouchable. Meanwhile, Naomi was unaware of how closely Evelyn and Darius were watching her growth. She was focused entirely on her next steps. She had meetings with new investors, potential partnerships, and community outreach programs. Every move she made was calculated. Every opportunity she seized was a step toward independence. But she knew one day she would have to confront her past. Evelyn Whitmore wouldn't just let her rise quietly. Darius wouldn't stand by if he discovered the truth fully. And Naomi understood that the moment she faced them would change everything. One evening, as she returned from a meeting, Naomi noticed an envelope slipped under her apartment door. Her name typed neatly on the front. She paused, heart racing. Was this another warning from Evelyn? Another attempt to intimidate her? Slowly, she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A sentence typed in bold letters. "You think you've won, but the game is just beginning." Naomi's lips curved into a faint smile. Evelyn Whitmore had underestimated her once. She would not make that mistake again. And somewhere deep inside, Naomi knew the moment of reckoning was approaching. The moment when she would face Evelyn and Darius, all truths laid bare, and show them exactly how much she was worth. Naomi Carter had changed. The shy, polite girl who once served coffee on Auburn Avenue was gone. In her place stood a woman whose confidence radiated in every step, every word, and every decision she made. Her startup had grown into a recognized company, her influence expanding quietly but powerfully across the business world. But the one thing she had never forgotten was Evelyn Whitmore, the woman who had tried to destroy her, to control Darius, to erase her from existence. Naomi knew that confrontation was inevitable, and she had prepared for it carefully. It began with an invitation. Naomi had discovered through careful research that Evelyn was hosting a gala at the Whitmore mansion, her annual display of power and influence. But this year, Naomi would attend, not as a guest, but as someone who would turn the tables. She arrived in a sleek black dress, understated yet commanding. She wore no flashy jewelry, but her presence alone drew the attention of everyone in the room. Even Darius noticed immediately. He had heard she was in Atlanta, but seeing her now, radiant, poised, and unstoppable, took his breath away. He stepped forward, but Naomi held up a hand. She would choose the moment. Evelyn Whitmore spotted Naomi almost immediately. Her smile faltered. Her eyes narrowed. The woman she had underestimated, dismissed, and attempted to destroy was standing in her house, unafraid, unbroken. "Naomi Carter," Evelyn said smoothly, approaching her, her tone polite but with an unmistakable edge. "I didn't expect to see you here." Naomi's lips curved into a small, controlled smile. "I didn't come for your approval," she replied evenly. "I came to show you something." Evelyn's brow arched. "Oh, and what is that?" Naomi held up a folder, identical to the one Evelyn had once used to manipulate her life. But this time, the content was different. It contained contracts, press releases, and financial statements showing her company's rapid growth, her partnerships, and her influence expanding faster than anyone could have imagined, including Evelyn. The room quieted as Naomi laid out her proof. Every powerful guest, every executive, every wealthy acquaintance looked on in astonishment. This was no longer a struggling young woman. This was a competitor, an equal, a force. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her wine glass. She had underestimated Naomi again. "Impressive," Evelyn said, her voice tight. "But I suppose power and success don't change everything." Naomi stepped closer, her gaze locked on Evelyn. "They do when you've earned it through hard work, integrity, and resilience, something you seem to have forgotten." From across the room, Darius watched, torn between admiration and guilt. He had doubted Naomi. He had allowed his mother's interference to drive them apart. Seeing her now, strong, confident, unstoppable, he realized just how wrong he had been. Naomi turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "Darius, I hope you understand everything now." He nodded slowly. "I do. I never doubted you, not for a second." Evelyn's face went pale. She had lost control, something she had never experienced. The woman she had tried to destroy had returned stronger, wiser, untouchable. Naomi didn't leave it at words. She had quietly secured media coverage of the event. Within minutes, cameras were capturing her presence at the gala, her success, and the subtle but undeniable victory over Evelyn. The world outside would now see what Evelyn had tried to hide, the truth of Naomi's worth. Evelyn tried one final move, leaning toward Darius. She doesn't belong in your life, she hissed. Darius stood straighter than he ever had in her presence. No, Mother, she does, and you can't stop that. Naomi's eyes glinted with quiet triumph. She had faced her enemy. She had shown Darius the truth, and she had reclaimed her life. But just as the room began to relax, a sudden phone alert buzzed in Naomi's pocket. She checked it carefully. Her smile faded. Another message. No sender, no explanation, just 3 words. She knows everything. Naomi's heart skipped a beat. Evelyn might have lost the battle tonight, but the war was far from over. Naomi Carter stood at the edge of her office balcony, the Charlotte skyline glowing beneath her. The wind teased her hair, but she barely noticed. Her mind was sharp, focused. The message had rattled her, but it didn't frighten her. Evelyn Whitmore had underestimated her once, and she would not make that mistake again. Inside the office, her team worked diligently, unaware of the tension brewing in Naomi's mind. Naomi's phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. Tonight, 8 p.m., Atlanta, don't fail to come. She stared at it for a long moment. It could be a trap. It could be Evelyn's final attempt to intimidate her, or it could be something else entirely. Naomi knew one thing: she was ready. By 7:30 p.m., she was on the road back to Atlanta. The city that had tried to crush her now would witness her triumph. She arrived at a private estate outside the city, the kind only someone wealthy could own. Security cameras dotted the property, but Naomi wasn't intimidated. She had planned for every step. Inside, the grand hall was empty except for 2 figures. Evelyn Whitmore stood with the same calm, calculating poise, though Naomi could sense a crack in her composure. And Darius, finally here, and fully aware now of what his mother had done. Naomi's voice cut through the silence. Evelyn, it's time to end this. Evelyn's smile was tight. I underestimated you. I'll admit that, but you think you've won. I've done more than win, Naomi replied evenly. I've survived your manipulations, rebuilt my life, and claimed my worth. And now you will see the truth, not through threats but through results. She turned slightly and motioned to Darius. He stepped forward, holding a folder of documents Naomi had sent him secretly. Financial statements, legal contracts, and media articles, all proving Naomi's growth, her independence, and her undeniable worth. Evelyn's eyes widened. She took the documents with trembling hands. This isn't possible. Darius's voice was firm. It is, Mother. She's done what you said she couldn't. She's outgrown your interference and proven herself beyond anything you could imagine. Naomi stepped closer to Evelyn. I am not just local. I am not just ordinary. I am everything you tried to deny me and more. You cannot control me. You cannot decide my worth. That ends now. Evelyn's face paled, and for the first time, Naomi saw fear, not because of wealth or status, but because she had no leverage. Naomi had dismantled every attempt to manipulate her. She had rebuilt herself stronger than Evelyn could imagine. Darius took Naomi's hand. I should have seen this sooner. I should have fought for you, not let her dictate your worth. Naomi smiled faintly. You're here now, that's what matters. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. She realized, painfully, that control had slipped from her fingers. Naomi Carter, the girl she once dismissed as too small, too local, too insignificant, had become untouchable. You may have won this round, Evelyn said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. But this isn't over. Naomi's eyes glimmered with quiet certainty. It is over. For me, at least. I will no longer allow anyone to define my life, my worth, or my choices. That chapter is closed. Darius and Naomi walked together out of the estate into the cool night air. The city stretched before them, full of possibility, full of new beginnings. Every shadow of doubt, every obstacle Evelyn had thrown in their way, had been overcome. Naomi looked up at the stars, feeling a calm satisfaction. She had survived the storm, faced the manipulations, and claimed her life back. And now she could finally move forward on her own terms, unafraid, unstoppable. But deep down, Naomi knew the lesson was clear. The world would always try to define her, underestimate her, or limit her. and she would always rise above it. Because Naomi Carter's worth had never been local, it had always been limitless. And this time, no one, not Evelyn Whitmore, not anyone else, could take it away. The story ends, but the legend of Naomi Carter had only just begun.